Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of WagMe TV, episode 11 today. And, we're coming to you on a day that will go down in the history of crypto, to say the least. Um, Definitely a really rough one today. Uh, we're going to debrief it all and kind of what sparked everything and what we think about everything. But yeah, definitely a tough one. But as always, I'm joined by the absolute fellas, the one and only, the doctor, Doc Mata, the All-American, Evan Smith, and the NFT Lord, Alex Garcia. How we holding up here, boys? Portfolio took a beating today, to say the least.
Yes. I hope everybody out there is staying safe. I hope everyone's all right. It's bloody out there. Stay strong. That's all I can say. It's tough to see, but it had to happen at some point, and markets go in cycles, right? So it's tough out there.
Yeah, definitely tough out there. It's I think for us, just getting into the crypto space in the last 2 years, this is probably our first, if definitely my first experience of seeing some of these guys crash, some of these coins crash. And it's an experience. I'm gonna remember this one. But yeah, we'll go into what's been happening, but yeah, I hope everybody's kind of staying safe out there. It's a bloody day in the markets.
Yeah, definitely testing my conviction. Like, this is why we DYOR all the time and try to find good fundamentals, because it's the only way you stay confident in what you're holding through a downturn like this.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we can kind of get into it. The talk of the town, the main topic of the day, and pretty much of the week, and what everyone is discussing right now is the absolute utter collapse of Terra Luna and the UST stablecoin. Now, we had discussed this project in the past, and we were all like pretty excited about it. It seemed like they were doing a lot of interesting things. As a refresher, UST was an algorithmic stablecoin. I believe Armada had given us a great recap of all that and explained it to us in a previous episode. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely do that. But the main thing is, instead of a fiat-backed stable coin, which has actual US dollar backing or treasury backing, basically, the algorithmic stable coin relies on basically arbitrage traders to maintain the peg to $1. And the real question is, like, from everyone who's outside, is like, what the hell happened, right? Like, what just went down? And so, I want to spend the first few minutes of this episode just recapping. I was kind of following it through the weekend and early part of this week, what exactly happened to, spur this entire sell-off, right? So the first thing that I actually saw is a tweet from Do Kwon. One of the guys I follow, shout out to him, OX Hams. He does phenomenal research. So anybody interested, absolutely go give him a follow. He's really good. But he pointed out, and I believe this was on May 7th, right? He pointed out that there was a slight depeg in the UST stablecoin. And, 25 basis points isn't that much, but, it's something that he noticed and also tied it to the Curve pool. And this, for me, was really interesting. I mean, Curve, most people in DeFi know it's one of the most influential projects kind of in the space. And so, seeing an imbalance in the Curve pool is, it's not like, oh, we need to hit the panic button right now, but it's something that, that huge whales basically are swapping out their UST for other stable coins. That is like the immediate kind of flag that people go to when something like this happens, right? And so, there was a little bit of chatter through the weekend, maybe a slight depegging. I can actually like pull up the chart to give you guys a little bit of timeline on all this stuff. But
Just a little heartburn.
yeah, so here, May 7th, you see, I mean, everything, this is a stable coin, right? So it's just literally tied to $1 for God knows how long up until this point, right? And you see a slight little, you start to see some ripples here on like May 7th, May 8th. This was kind of, there was, some talk on Twitter. Nothing concrete had really happened. But what this really caused was, if the peg actually loses, if the stablecoin actually loses peg, all of a sudden, because it's all built on trust and built on arbitrageurs, if the arbitrageurs aren't actually doing what they're supposed to do to maintain the peg, all of a sudden you can have like a real problem, right? And so as these fears kind of continued to snowball over the last few days, you see it get more and more volatile up until, I believe, Monday. Things just really shit hit the fan completely. And so what you saw happen was kind of the curve pool that we're talking about that OX Hams pointed out. I have it here. And now you see UST is 92% of this pool. And so essentially what happened was a modern day bank run, right? People who had their assets in Anchor, people who were holding UST, their murmur started snowballing, things started happening. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't want to be exposed to this asset anymore, right? If this stable coin that's supposed to be $1 is now 99 cents, I want it to be $1. I'm just going to swap it for USDC or USDT or something that is, right? And all of a sudden that applies more sell pressure. Now we're at 98. Now more sell pressure. People, it's a snowballing effect and essentially just a bank run. And all of a sudden,
The
before
further
you
it
know
goes
it,
down, the more people want to sell it and drop it.
all of a sudden, shit hits the fan and you're at 95 and you've officially completely lost the peg, right? And so then the question is like, okay, how did this snowball? Because this is like, it's one project, it's one stable coin. Like, why did it spread so far, right? And there's kind of two reasons for that. One, UST was the third largest stable coin in all of crypto, right? So a ton of people were using it. It was used on a ton of different decentralized exchanges. It's in a ton of people's wallets. It's just very entrenched in the crypto sphere, right? The second reason is, what was I going to say? It was Do Kwon. Oh yeah, Do Kwon's, kind of push to have Luna and UST tied to Bitcoin. And this is where you see how the collapse of UST starts causing a systemic risk for the entire crypto, atmosphere, entire crypto arena. And so if you look at what ended up happening as UST, started losing peg, there ended up being more and more pressure, because if they lose peg, then like their entire project gets screwed, right? And so what they said was, okay, we are going to deploy 1.5 billion in order to maintain liquidity and try to hold the peg, basically, right? Because they had so much Bitcoin lined up. They had been buying Bitcoin for a while, as we had mentioned in previous episodes. This is the original reason why they did, right? So they said they don't want to exit their Bitcoin position, but they're doing this to maintain the peg of UST, right? So if the price of UST is less than the peg, so if it's less than $1, they're going to basically sell their Bitcoin and start buying UST to start putting buy pressure on the token, right? And the flip in reverse. Obviously, that's not a problem because UST was never over the peg, right? So essentially what this happened, what this caused was a cascading effect, not only in UST and in Luna, but also in Bitcoin. All of a sudden you have billions or multiple millions, if not over $1 billion of Bitcoin being dumped and sold into the market in kind of one go. And you see just the cascading effect of all these things combined. Hopefully, I mean, I know that was kind of a mouthful, but trying to run through it semi quickly. Was that clear, guys? Like, do you guys have any questions? Any concerns? Obviously, a lot of concerns, but happy to answer any questions. I was kind of tracking it over the last few days. Just crazy. Just crazy.
And so over, you know, the last month and a half, they've really switched to this Bitcoin strategy, right? Where they were trying to be almost too big to fail, right? Like buying up enough Bitcoin where if the stable coin went down, you know, they've got to sell off these massive amounts of Bitcoin. Before that, how were they maintaining the peg? Was it through sell off of Luna, or what was how did they do that?
So the mechanism behind the algorithmic coin is basically, let's say 1 UST loses peg and it goes down to 95 cents, right?
Yeah.
The key here is that you can always exchange 1 UST for $1 worth of Luna, right?
Yeah.
And this is where the arbitrage kind of comes in, right? So what they're banking on is an arbitrage trader. Let's say the peg goes down to 95 cents, right? An arbitrage trader would buy UST in the market for 95 cents. They would go and immediately on Terra's exchange, swap that for $1 worth of Luna. And that new Luna would be new Luna that is minted, right? So the supply of Luna would go up, and that person would then could immediately sell that in the market for $1, right?
Right.
So they pocketed the 5 cents, that 5 cent differential, right? But it incentivizes arbitrage traders to then go buy UST, right? And pull it back up to the peg. On the flip side, if the reverse happens and if it's over the peg, you can do the absolute reverse of this, where you would actually be burning Luna. Armada, that's correct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they essentially are achieving price stability by manipulating or adjusting their supply according to some of the fluctuations in the demand, is like a really good way to put it, right? So if there's some sort of fiscal expansion, like in the case that there's rising demand of UST, the supply of the token needs to be increased as well to offset that demand. If the price of Terra then were to fall on the opposite side of that, below the peg, like we saw recently, the supply of Terra needs to be reduced to maintain that peg. And so when it falls like it did, that stabilization mechanism is much harder to do, as we saw, right? And they have to, I mean, it was interesting, right? Because at first I was thinking, to that point, like they were an algorithmic stable coin through and through, and then they started to buy Bitcoin. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and it was exciting because algorithmic stable coins are a little bit sketchy because we know stuff like this can happen.
Right.
And then they started to buy Bitcoin, and we're like, okay, so now they're backing themselves at least slightly with an asset that doesn't feel as volatile, that feels a little bit more stable. It's been more widely adopted, which gave us a little bit more bullish sentiment towards this. Like, this can stay around longer than some of these other coins through a bear market, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to see, like, it dropped so far, and there was so much fun. There was so much of like the bank run mentality, and we'll get into this and how it happened and all that stuff and theories on it. But it went so poorly that even selling that backing, they weren't able to survive, or well, likely weren't able to survive, which is such a crazy thing to me, right? If they were just strictly algorithmic, they would have been done right away. Like, they were able to like keep themselves afloat for a second, which was super interesting to see. But I think everyone kind of just lost hope, and the market in general has been very bearish and the sentiment has been bad. So that didn't help them. It was just, I think they got hit with a million different angles, and it was just a terrible time for all of that to happen, which wasn't planned. We'll get into that. But
yeah, it's interesting to see because it's like a stress test almost, right? It's like when things are all rosy and good, it's easy to, stay afloat, no problem. But when things get bad, that's when the true test of the protocol, I guess, gets that's when you really get tested. Just want to show one chart.
Did that make sense though, Evan, the way we kind of explained that?
Yeah,
With
and I think it gets back to the point of just the amount of like the size that works in the Bitcoin markets. Like, it's Do Kwon trying to put enough backing into his coin, where he's able to achieve that price stability. But as we'll talk about later, like in the episode, there's other whales out there that have that same size that can manipulate it. So sorry, go ahead, Zoe.
No, I just wanted to, when you think about like the arbitrage traders, right? The thing that's happening right now is you are having incredible emissions of Luna into the market because people are trying to basically arb to make money, right? And so what you end up having is a shit ton of Luna being minted into the market and being immediately sold. And so while the peg may be, getting closer, the price of Luna is just absolutely getting wrecked, right? Because everyone is basically buying this chart, right? Like I'm going to buy this for 40 cents and I'm going to immediately go swap it for $1 of Luna and then sell Luna in the market to make that spread, right? So you're basically minting new Luna and selling it. So it's like a double negative. There's no buy pressure on Luna at the moment, right? Which is evident by this chart. So, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, 2 days ago, this thing was at like, 80. And now it's at 127. It's truly a just one for the books. You really,
which is gonna hit $1 first, Luna or UST?
I know. I know.
Oh man, I'm laughing, but it's not funny.
Well,
were you saying something, Sia?
No, I was just saying I would probably vote Luna with what's going on. Like I mean, it's just and I just like noticed out of the corner of my eye that BlackRock started trending on Twitter, and I think it's because of the conspiracy stuff going around. But
and so it pays for these traders that are manipulating that gap for UST to stay under $1, right? They're continuing to be able to create that margin just by like manipulating the stablecoin, right?
Yeah, if you can actually arb that spread, then yeah, exactly. It's definitely good.
Until they're the same value, right? Then it wouldn't matter. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so it's essentially Do Kwon and is whatever pool of money he's got versus people that are diving in here for like a quick flip, and that's why it seems like it could easily stay under $1 for like a very long time.
I was gonna say, technically, can't Luna go to zero if UST is like down? Like I guess, could Luna go to zero if UST still has, let's say, like a couple cents of value, or would it be UST goes down first before Luna?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's
because you can.
Well, and it almost like the spread becomes even fatter.
The thing is, it's
UST were to
for
go down.
$1, right? So let's say it's like you can always exchange it for $1's worth of Luna. Like that is the core principle, right?
Right.
And so if you think about that, even if Luna's at 50 cents, you would buy UST at whatever it is, but then still swap it for 2 Luna because that'd be $1 versus $1 worth of Luna, right? And you'd still sell it. So like in theory, Luna could just go to zero because you'd always like people can always make that like arb spread.
Right.
And so like, I mean, the gamble was that it wouldn't get to this point, obviously. And it has. So we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. I think USD could potentially repeg, but it'll take some time. What's crazy is that, people are talking about, this being like a black swan event and everything. But at the same time, like I saw multiple people over the last 3 months or so, like voicing concerns about this and how Luna just create systemic risk within the crypto ecosystem, especially when they started buying Bitcoin too. On one side, it's like, it's great that they're backing their asset, backing their stable coin with like a trusted asset. On the flip side, in the event of, a total sell-off and in the event of a depeg, they're essentially just wrecking Bitcoin. They're holding the whole market hostage. And we saw that over the last couple of days. But yeah, I guess we can.
Instantly when they mobilized that, I think the exchange inflows all spiked. Typically when that happens, it's usually they're selling their shares of Bitcoin, which is just, I mean, at first you're like, oh, they're buying Bitcoin. This is like, I remember us talking about it. It's like, oh yeah, this is awesome. We love it. Like, pump the price a little bit. Sounds good. Let's keep it level. And then hopefully we'll get into that FOMO phase. And then something like this happens in the midst of a crash already happening.
Right.
We see this happen, and then they have to release their whatever 1.5 billion or whatever they had of Bitcoin pretty much instantly, sent it down even further. There's just it's just a cascading effect of brutality. Honestly, it was bloody. They'd say blood in the streets. It was bloody.
Right.
And I think a lot of the systemic risks, probably, Zoe, that you mentioned, and obviously this too, but I feel like how many popular DeFi protocols that UST was a part of is just like crazy. Like Lido, TerraSwap, Anchor, like people had millions of dollars in these liquidity pools and just like DeFi protocols. And once you take out the stablecoin that supports them all, I mean, it's just, so it's crazy, because that also begs the question, like, is Terra really decentralized then? Because like, it's kind of, like that kind of becomes the question after that.
I think the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
At least at this point, they were hoping to be. I think the answer and I think when we talk about most altcoins, it's kind of the case, right? We talk about Solana, we talk about Avalanche. It's like, yeah, the goal is to ultimately be fully decentralized, but they're all fairly centralized to an extent, which is interesting. I like that point. I like that point, because everyone always boasts being decentralized. It's like, okay, but how decentralized are you?
Yeah. And that was the idea behind starting it out as an algorithmic stablecoin, right? So like, that was supposed to basically it was going to work itself out without Do Kwon having to stick his hands in it, or the team having to stick his hands in it.
Yep.
The idea.
I think that changed a lot when they started to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
As well, right?
Yeah.
So
actually, the CEO and founder of FTX, that trading platform, he did an interview like 2 weeks ago or something, and they asked him about Terra, and he said, like, when they started buying Bitcoin is when, like, essentially I thought it was, just a matter of time before it collapsed. Like, if you're going to peg a stable coin to, a risky and volatile asset with that much money, like, it's just kind of a matter of time. And that made me wonder, like, because I didn't really follow Do Kwon until he started buying the Bitcoin. Like, that's when I started kind of paying attention to him. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious if you remember, like, what his reasoning was behind, like, aside from having a ton of Bitcoin just liquid, like in case of an emergency or something, like, what was the idea of attaching a risky asset to the stable coin? Like, obviously stable coin's already risky, but what was the theory behind that?
I think it was just kind of going into the same idea of the gold standard almost, right? Like, if you picture Bitcoin as digital gold, right? I think he was going for the exact same thing of like having reserves of, like, if we're going to have a digital stable coin UST, we want to have it be backed by what's known as digital gold, which is in today's terms just Bitcoin, right? I think that's like the original like thought process.
I think we lost you there, so mind running through that again?
Did you break, or did I break up?
Just like the last like 5 seconds or so.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. No, I was just saying like the reason for doing that was to be essentially like a digital gold standard, right? the same reason why you would have the gold standard back in the day is I think what he was going after, right?
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense if like you're looking, maybe like 5 to 10 years out, like once Bitcoin is fully mined and maybe it stabilizes a little bit in price. But I love the forward thinking. Like I'm kind of curious if this is going to spur other Luna type projects to try algorithmic stablecoins and like analyze what went wrong with Luna and try to basically iterate on it.
Yeah. The problem is, I mean, we can kind of talk about this is, was this an attack? Was this, because the thing is, if it's an attack, then any algorithmic stablecoin in theory is prone to the same attack, right? So
True.
I know there's like a couple of rumors going around about like Citadel and like Ev, I don't know if you have any like info or anything on that, or if you can explain that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably bring up the deleted tweet by Chuck Hutchinson.
Lobster man.
Yeah, but I don't think we've talked about Citadel Securities or Citadel on here, but Citadel is essentially an enormous hedge fund that just looks to kind of make money in any situation, and they've got a crypto arm that operates in the crypto space, and and so they started off, and do you mind if we could pull up that
yeah, I got it. And Ev, I'm pretty sure you'd probably know this better than me, but Citadel was the firm that was involved in the whole Robinhood like scandal thing, right? Where they were kind of paying each other back and forth.
Yeah.
And payment for order flow.
Yeah.
Wait, I didn't know this.
They had massive shorts on GameStop, right? But they also had significant investment within Robinhood.
Oh.
And so essentially they were in these crazy positions that they needed to get out of, which is why they, stopped trading, why Robinhood stopped trading on GameStop. What is that? Mid 2020, once everybody got their stimulus checks to ape into. But yeah, so a brief little overview, essentially, and I don't know the entire timeline of this. I figured this probably spanned over the last month, but Citadel went about buying 100,000 Bitcoins. So I believe that's close to,
$3-4 billion.
Yeah, I was going to say like, $4 or $5 billion, something like that. And took 25K worth of those Bitcoins and swapped them for UST. This was something where it sounds like they reached out to Do Kwon, and he understood that, as he's trying to accumulate Bitcoin to have these resources to back his protocols, it's an easy swap for them. Essentially, they took that 25K of Bitcoin worth. So, you figure around $1 billion worth of UST, and began to, I believe, sell it off. And essentially, Do Kwon had to go through the process of selling his Bitcoin to replenish the reserves and repeg UST. Obviously, he's done that unsuccessfully. And so that's been basically the process of the manipulation of this coin, where these traders at Citadel, were obviously following Do Kwon and Terra. They knew that Do Kwon had been very public about buying Bitcoin to back his protocol, creating that gold standard, and knew that he was susceptible to a strong price decrease in the reserve asset that was backing their protocol. And so that's kind of what we saw here. And I'm sure you guys have more on it, but it's just a crazy thing of we work in size, or not us, but others work in size in the crypto sphere, trading outrageous amounts of Bitcoin. But you realize when Wall Street, when some of these other investment groups, which could be very bullish, if they ever get into Bitcoin, to put that within their portfolio, would be very bullish. But when they come in and, they're acting as an enemy towards a protocol or a bad actor in this space, then, this could really pose a major threat. And we're kind of seeing it here.
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
it's a big call for everyone hates regulation in the
Mhm.
space, right? But I feel like it's a big call for why it's probably needed is when this big money starts to come in and they can really manipulate things. I mean, whether it was
So-
Citadel or not, I mean, it's something that needs to be a little bit more regulated, especially like with Do Kwon, as you said, very public, saying he's buying. Not only that, you can track it on chain and see his wallet buying, or you can see the LFG wallet buying. So it's
Right.
like not only is he saying it, oh, he's just saying it. No, you can actually know if that's the case, which is an interesting add to that, right?
Yeah, it's worth noting for the listeners that both Citadel and Gemini, I don't know about BlackRock, but both of them have denied that this happened. I'm curious, in that tweet it says per their loan book or something. Like
Yeah.
I haven't actually seen. I'd be curious to see that. Like I haven't actually seen. I've obviously seen like a lot of this going around on Twitter. I haven't actually seen any like on-chain evidence or per like a loan book evidence or anything. It I don't know what the like how hard it is to borrow that amount of Bitcoin, but I feel like I don't know. Maybe
Well, how much is Saylor borrowing? Michael Saylor's borrowing a ton, right? He's got to be up there.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, I
probably
just
borrowing in the hundreds of millions for sure.
yeah, I just
Which is
like
another thing to this little cascading effect,
Yeah.
right? Gosh.
yeah.
They-
I mean, what
actually, yeah,
they're
they're
basically saying
okay.
is like they borrowed a shit ton of Bitcoin, started to depeg UST, and they knew that it would continue to depeg because others would just like follow suit and like snowball and like it would just turn into a bank run. And then they also
Spread the fun.
shorted like simultaneously shorted Bitcoin, which would also require borrowing, right? Like so
Mhm.
like what I don't know is that like how easy is it to borrow like 3 or 4 billion of Bitcoin? Like is that like something that they can just do like really easily? Because that just seems like that's a lot. That is a lot.
I mean,
So it's
it
like
really it depends how much they have under management, right? I mean, if Citadel has 100 billion under management, they're not going to have a problem getting a $4 billion loan, you know. So it's
no, I mean, does like how much Bitcoin does like Gemini have to lend them like that? Like
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm actually surprised
you have
Gemini
to
has that much.
source the borrow from somewhere, right?
Right.
It's like
And I figured it's probably, I'm sure a significant amount of it or some of it was from decentralized exchanges like Coinbase, like an FTX, where you have your
you mean
Bitcoin.
centralized exchanges?
Centralized. Sorry, did I say decentralized?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No. Okay, okay.
Yeah, centralized, where yeah, you've bought your Bitcoin on these platforms, but it's not actually your own, and so it's something where they can easily lend this out to somebody like a Citadel, like a BlackRock, to do this. So
Yeah. I haven't I've seen threads being written about this and people telling a story and stuff, and like if that's true, that's fucking crazy. Dead ass. Like that is wild. That is some
what's
that is some
market
crazy stuff.
manipulation, right?
Yeah,
It-
I don't know.
Yeah, it's classic
I haven't seen
manipulation.
enough like concrete evidence to like think that that's what happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like we can't rule it off the table. Like we can't rule off especially we can't rule off the table where this was like a coordinated like effort to do this. That's like
Yeah. I think that's the big thing, right? Whether
Yeah.
it was Citadel, Black, whatever, I think it's probably pretty obvious that there was some sort of big money, some sort of whale that was attempting to manipulate you. I mean, this isn't retail, right? I mean, like there's just too much money going on. It's just too well timed for that to be the case.
And you're right. It's not one transaction. This is a series of transactions over a long period of time. This is the long play. And it's something that like, they'll have to, they borrowed these and they're going to have to buy these Bitcoins back. So I wonder if it's something, on the end of getting out of their positions, getting out of their loans, like, it becomes more evident of who this was rather than just like the speculation that's happening on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, for sure.
That makes sense. No, yeah, I mean, it also goes with the narrative of like a lot of these big banks and big investment firms don't like Bitcoin and don't like they're not necessarily they don't like Bitcoin, but they're threatened by the idea of a decentralized economy and like a decentralized currency system, just because, you know, a lot of what their revenues hinge on is interest rates and like, you know, people borrowing and then charging the money for that, right? So a lot of the times, like when they see people sinking this much money into Bitcoin or it's going on a run, like, you know, the narrative is like, okay, these people, you know, it's against their interest to, you know, be supporting it. But I think that's why crypto Twitter also ate it up, because it's like, you know, the David versus Goliath kind of narrative.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting that's an interesting way to look at it for sure too, because it's just like, I mean, like it's like they caused this whole thing to happen and then they can go and say, I told you so. Like, look, that's like, well, that would have never happened if it weren't for you, for these meddling kids. But no, that's an interesting one. We'll have to keep track of that one, because I feel like there's so much flying around on that. And Evan, you were the first one to bring that to my eyes, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, if that's true.
Yeah. And I think Garcia had seen it. I think it was something that was kind of floating around on Twitter, but yeah, it's crazy to see the size that, you know, people are working in. And I, you know, that's something that is obviously a huge bear case for the entire industry is if, you know, if you're not able to get this institutional adoption, that's going to be able to create this foundation for a lot of these coins, you know, they're going to be susceptible to attacks from larger, you know, whales or, you know, institutions with money out there. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride.
I think it kind of begs the question, you know, now we kind of covered like what happened, but I guess where do we kind of go from here? Like, what are your guys' thoughts? Like, there's obviously the regulatory piece. There's a lot to work through, right? You know, it's as we've kind of mentioned before in previous episodes and other topics, like it's evidence that the space is extremely young and very, very just vulnerable to different things. A lot of growing pains. So I'd just be curious to get your guys' opinion on, you know, obviously a dark day in crypto, but like where do we go from here?
Yeah, I feel like the biggest thing for me, like that I've seen is like trust. Like I feel like I'm even feeling it too. Like, oh wow, am I just being an idiot by investing my money in crypto? You know, like you get those thoughts, right? And like I feel like people are going to be way more diligent about reading white papers and about like docs founders and about looking into founders' histories. Like I don't know if I kind of briefly mentioned this, but there's rumors that Do Kwon basically dissolved like the Terraform like incorporated company on April 30th. And like this guy posted kind of like the Korean documents from the government. I don't know how legitimate this is. It's just another kind of rumor. And, you know, people are like starting to translate it and starting to go through it. And it's kind of a lot to read through right now, but I'm definitely, we can drop this stuff in the link below, but this guy kind of translated it out of Korean, and started going through the history. But, yeah. And the other thing was, I think, Soam, you mentioned this, didn't he? I thought I had the tweet here somewhere, but, he had run a separate stable coin that had failed, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Two?
I got it up
Okay.
here.
I'll stop sharing.
Got the news story up here. It was from I believe CoinDesk, something. Yeah,
Okay.
CoinDesk. He's behind another failed stable coin, which, like, look, there's
It's a learning
you know,
process.
I don't
I was gonna say
It
it can't be 100% every time.
Yeah.
This doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
say that
Probably
much
wouldn't
to
have
me.
started this if that one succeeded. Let's be honest. So.
Right. So I mean, here's the thing. There's gonna be a lot that comes out, and you kind of just, like anything else, have to do your own research and figure out what you think. I think a lot of it on at least this is trying to draw like you know, this isn't as egregious as like Time Wonderland, for example, where, you know, the head of their treasury, the person who was managing their treasury, was a convicted felon, right? Like that is like, and the founder Danny knew
I
about
don't
it,
love to see it.
right? Like, So like they're trying to make it seem like it was some, you know, premeditated thing. Like there's obviously not enough information at this point, I think, to go off of. But you know, that is something, you know, when something like this happens, like, you know, the rumor mill is just going to start running. So
Yeah.
it's going to be something that, you know, we're not going to have all the answers today. We're not going to have all the answers tomorrow. It's going to be something that we're going to have to, you know, continue to cover, continue to do research on, and kind of see how it evolves. But yeah, definitely a lot of you know, negative press coming out about Do Kwon at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, you know, a lot of these stable coins are built differently. There's different ways to kind of create this price stability, and I feel like it puts almost every cryptocurrency on like you got to go back in and look at the mechanics of how these coins are creating their value or holding their value, whether they're a stable coin or just, you know, regular crypto coin. You know, it's something where you're starting to realize that a lot of these coins are more susceptible to some other like bad actors or other you know, possible, I don't know, problems that they could run into. So I, you know, maybe it's something where, you know, even in our podcast going forward, we start to talk about like what are the different ways that this could happen, because it feels like you're right. So it's almost kind of shifted some of the trust in the space, and you know, you really got to start and go back and do due diligence on the stuff that you're already in.
Yeah, because I mean, like I looked at Luna as like a blue chip altcoin. Like I was like, yeah, I mean, that's, you know,
Yep.
that's one maybe I'll, you know, DCA in along with Solana. Like that's, you know, a solid play. And I think like back to the point about trust, like I feel like people are going to start. It's like it's a bad moment, but a healthy reminder that like you can't just like go and search Luna and Twitter and then get all, you know, moon boyish. Like you gotta like go read the white paper. You gotta, you know, really think it through. I mean, I think at the same time, you also need to pay attention to like the news that's coming out, right? Like each one of your projects, like it's a reminder that crypto is a very active, you know, unless you're investing in Bitcoin, you can kind of relax. But to your point, Zoe, like if you didn't hop on Twitter and then didn't message us, like, you know, you would maybe still have your money in Luna. So it's like, it's a good reminder. Like it's not, crypto's not for the people who don't want to pay, you know, keep up with their investments either.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I think a lot of people, the people who are still alive, like know that, I think, is the people who are like hodl. That's
Yeah.
going to get you wrecked. That's going to get you dumped on by whales.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. When I covered Luna, my biggest concern was regulations, which is when we talked about kind of that off switch where you could just be like, nope, decentralized, like you're done. This was before they were buying Bitcoin. And this wasn't even something that like came onto my radar, right? So it's just like, I think that's also just exposure to the space and seeing things happen once, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? It's like now that we know that that's the case, we got to start to look a little bit deeper into the tokenomics, who's leading the projects, what their history is, as CEO was kind of saying, right? And so it's just a tough one. That's a tough one because, like Garcia was saying, I mean, I looked at it as kind of one of the blue chips
Right.
here moving forward. I thought they were going to start to do really well from a stable coin perspective. They were kind of creeping their way up on Tether. Clearly not anymore. But no, it's just interesting. And I feel like, I mean, I guess what are our thoughts on the stable coins? Like at some point, is there just going to be one stable coin, or like, are there always going to be a few that we're working with? Like what's the end game there? I don't really know. Maybe something I need to do a little bit of a deep dive on, but any
I mean, I
thoughts there?
think, you know, I think what's abundantly clear is that the regulation is going to come, and something like this happens. It's like, if it wasn't already coming, this is just like speeding it up. Right. And I know we've had discussions about like a central bank digital currency and like things like that. And so, you know, there's a chance, like at the end of the day, like you can't just use like the US dollar, right? Like you can't just like, even if it like in hindsight, right? It's like, it's obvious, like, okay, there's an algorithm, but like you have no US dollars. So like, how can you use the US dollar, right? So the government will come. There's just no doubt about it, right? In stable coins like USDC and stuff that actually have like, USDC has dollar deposits, like fixed dollar deposits, and US treasuries, right? I think things like that will have to be established like by law.
Right.
Things like you actually have backing for the amount of
Mhm.
stable coin that is out there in the world that you're issuing, right? And then on the flip side of the CBDC or whatever, right? Central bank digital currency, that's probably, I mean, I feel like I would hate that, but that's like a potential end game, right?
Yeah, I think like one of this. So like I definitely think regulation could be a good thing. I think like long term in terms of like end game, what you were saying, Mata, like what I'm worried about is when we kind of come to that point where we finally need to regulate and governments finally need to figure it out. It's against the government's interest to support stable coins. Like they would just create their own currency. So what I see happening is governments around the world within the next 5 or 10 years, at least making a push to try to create their own, stable crypto, whatever it is, pegged to their currency. And why that would be so like detrimental to crypto overall is because there goes like the decentralization aspect, right? Like
it's everything that
no
we
way
like
a government's
want.
ever,
Yeah.
no one's ever given up power once they have it. So like, the governments are going to keep it centralized. So that's the only thing about regulation that scares me. But I think if it's done in a not so aggressive way like that, and they allow stable coins to thrive, it'd be a really good thing for crypto.
I think they'll allow certain stable coins to thrive, but they'll have like guidelines around like what needs to be done in
Yeah.
order to, like, you have to have some reserves. I think they'll make you have some sort
Right.
of reserves.
Open books.
And probably exactly, and probably some like, because the thing is like, there's been so much controversy about Tether, right?
Mm.
The issue with Tether is like everything runs smooth, but at the same time, like there's no evidence that they have the backing for the amount of Tether that's out there, right? And so just to your point, Evan, like having the open books, like being able to, prove that you have like certain reserves and like backing for the stable coin. I think like maybe in the long run, like, because I mean, in theory, like a lot of the people that support crypto don't actually even believe in like a, centralized currency such as the dollar, euro, or whatever, right? And so in the long run, it's almost like stable coins, almost a bridge to get to that future of, that not being a thing, right?
Right.
It's too abrupt to just be like, oh, everything is going to be transacted in like Bitcoin or like another, cryptocurrency. But like stable coins offer a bridge to get to that future almost, right? Because you can't just completely ignore the world that we live in today.
Yeah. And I think the tough part about growth is that like mistakes and stuff like this has to be made for advancements in the space. Like it's quite obvious that this style of stable coin is not going to work, and maybe it would have worked before. I don't know the specifics of it, but we know that there was a critical mistake made trying to back it almost like the gold standard with Bitcoin. So it's stuff that like, we continue to learn from. I like the idea of opening the books. It then brings in this whole other conversation around regulation, whether that's good for the space, whether that's bad. That's also another lesson we're going to learn down the road. So we'll be here the entire time.
Yeah, I think the main, I mean, there were obviously many issues made or like many mistakes made through the whole Luna process. The one thing is like inherently the assumption with Luna is that the financial incentive will help hold the peg, right?
Yeah.
Like there is financial incentive for arb traders. And because of that financial incentive, the peg will be held. The thing that fails to realize is that in a period of pure panic, like no one gives a shit about financial incentives. People only give a shit about getting their money out.
Yeah.
Right. And so that just is a clear flaw in like the idea of algorithmic stable coins, because, as we were talking about before, when it's all, sunny and rosy out and like the environment is great, sure, works perfectly. The arb traders are doing their arbitrage, they're holding the peg, everything is good. All of a sudden it's like there's a fucking bank run. Then what? Right? Then nobody cares. Then your arb traders don't care. They're just like, screw it. Or the masses just overpower like the power of the arb traders, and like that's just it, right? So kind of a learning lesson there in terms of there's a limit to how much financial incentive can actually hold up like a huge economic system almost, right?
Yeah. And when you look at some of the stuff that when you look at the US government, you've got FDIC backing on like a certain value within your accounts. And that's something that like slows bank runs. There's also other stops that do as well.
Yeah.
And that regulation brings to the space. But it's a question of what does regulation look like in a decentralized, cryptocurrency? Hasn't been seen yet. I think Ripple is an example where they're still probably trying to figure stuff out, and they really haven't been able to come to consensus. So
the tricky thing, and also that I'm thinking about this in terms of regulation, is like there's different, like you can make an argument that like, is it like different types of crypto is like, is it a security? Is it not a security? Is it a commodity? Like you could make the argument that Ethereum is like a commodity, right? It's like you're literally paying gas. You're like, there's a utility behind it. It's necessary for like the like blockchain itself to run. Like it's almost like a utility, like it's almost like a commodity, right? Versus like a Bitcoin or another type of crypto, which is like actually could be considered a security, or like NFTs. It's like, what is NFT, right? Like what is it? A security? It's not a commodity, I don't think, but like maybe, like, I don't know, right? And so when you think about the government and like how they regulate, like there's different agencies and different organizations that regulate different part of the market. So that's going to be something that's tricky, like in terms of like what government agencies actually regulate what part of the crypto market, and like how are things defined, whether it's a security or not. Like, is it the SEC dealing with it, or if it's like another organization? It's going to be very tricky to figure out like exactly how to kind of divide up this space as it rapidly evolves and is obviously super brand new.
Yeah, I'm curious when it's actually going to come to a head, like when the government's actually just, has basically no choice but to, get involved. I feel like right now they're probably just kind of watching it. And I think, obviously they've addressed it in the past, like, it's been talked about by the IRS, and like they have sections on crypto, but at the same time, you're right, it hasn't been like fully thought about in terms of regulation. I think like the positive outcome of all this is that it has turned into a pretty solid buying opportunity for a lot of people that, maybe up in this area in the 50s, high 40s, like, didn't really feel comfortable buying it quite yet. And the chance for people to become whole coiners, obviously. But I feel like over the next, few months, maybe even year, like it's going to be a great buying opportunity long term if you're still bullish on like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Obviously altcoins, that's a whole nother story, but I think, in terms of the opportunity for Bitcoin, like the next few months, I don't think it's going to get any better. So I'm kind of excited to see.
I mean, talk about a textbook bear flag.
I know, that's what
Look at how this thing worked
you
out.
nailed that last week.
I got a little lucky because Do Kwon helped out, but
Oh man. But no, I mean, it's textbook, and here we are. I mean, look at that RSI, right? Not financial advice. We're in a decent spot if you still believe in the fundamentals, if you still believe in Bitcoin. here's your chance, right? I mean, this is what we all hope for is somewhere in this range where it can get a little bit lower and we can continue to accumulate. So stay safe out there, everybody. It's a crazy
Yeah.
time.
Can you take us through a little bit of this, like in terms of what levels you're watching? Just kind of explain this a little bit. It seems like right at that red line, we got a little bit of a bounce, but on a long-term time frame, do we have any chance to like basically bounce before just obviously the last bull market, high was 20K. And so, that's going to be a level that a lot of people are watching, but is there anything to stop us from getting there right now?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like like so much of it hinges on macro stuff now. Like personally, I believe we're out of a bull market. I think we're more either at the beginning or in the middle, not middle, but in a bear market currently. Just because I don't really see like, quantitative tightening helping any of this, especially risk on assets like we've been talking about. But I do think, having said that, I don't think it's just going to go like this. But
Right.
I think like we could, play around here, bounce, and then probably go down again. Like, you see that happen here. It kind of happens, here. So like it could fake us out and then keep going down. I don't think it's just going to, fly down because people are going to be dollar cost averaging on the way down. But to your point, we really don't have much stopping us down to 20K. Why I drew this down to like 16.5 is because that's when like the last resemblance of a support was down here before we kind of just ripped like crazy. But the other thing that makes me think we may just bounce briefly is that we haven't been this oversold since back in late January. So down here. So we're kind of hitting that same area right here.
That's when Russia went into Ukraine, right?
Yep. That was this day right here. We fell like, 16, almost actually 20% basically. But then we recovered and essentially doubled that and did 40%, plus before we had this whole kind of downward swing. But so not saying that we're going to turn around and go 40% back up, but we could bounce for a little. I would say, between 25 and 20K, maybe we settle somewhere and then bounce, but it's really anyone's call at this point.
Yeah. And Terra can't sell any more Bitcoin. So.
Oh, they can't?
Did they sell it all or did they not sell it all?
I don't know.
Actually, sold all of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Then maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. That's crazy. That's wild that one group can bring it down that much. Like it's insane.
Crazy. Obviously a lot on the macro side to keep an eye on. Something that we didn't really talk about today, but the, CPI numbers today, still not good, still not going down, still got a nice, what was it? Ev, like 8 point something? 8.3.
8.3. Yeah.
8.3% print. So, inflation's still really high. The goal of the Fed is obviously to battle that. And so until we start seeing some progress there, hawkish Fed it is, looks like. So that's obviously going to be tricky for risk on assets. We're definitely going to keep an eye on that. I think, in our group chat, we've been talking about various factors like the used car index and things like that, like showing signs of cracking. So we'll have to see if that pulls through. I think it should at some point pull through to these inflation prints. Just a question of how long and what month that hits. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Ev, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to ask what the schedule looks like going forward. Like, I think we probably have a Fed meeting for June around the same time next month. But
yep.
For the
pull up the economic calendar.
June 14th, I think I'm seeing.
Okay. Hopefully the second half of May will be a little less eventful than the start of May.
I'm trying to debate whether or not like the slow tread down was worse or if it was nicer to just rip the Band-Aid off and drop 15, 20%. Like, I don't know which one was worse because I feel like
And
I was
also
getting into
basically
this
lose one of the
weird
top
lull.
protocols.
Yeah, that wasn't great. We didn't love that. But I'm just talking strictly Bitcoin. Like, was it worse having to watch that the last month just bounce and bounce and bounce? And,
Yeah.
oh, it's higher lows. Or was it better just to rip the Band-Aid off and hopefully we can have a little bit of a recovery from here? We'll
Yeah,
see.
I think these people probably would have said not straight down, but
True.
but I personally agree with you, man. I feel like I rather just rip the Band-Aid off, but I just thought the tweet was interesting because like it wasn't just like Luna. Like this kind of speaks to Zoe's point before of like the cascading effect of it, of like a $1.1 billion in liquidations across almost 300,000 people. Like that's crazy. Like that's, you know, a third of a million people were affected by one protocol going under. You know, it's pretty wild, and that's just in liquidations. That's not people who just held Luna as an investment. So like it's just crazy how that affects so many people.
No doubt. No doubt. I have the we'll just wrap with the economic calendar here. Just macro things to keep an eye out for. Obviously today we had CPI, jobless claims tomorrow, so some eyes on the labor market. Go blue, consumer sentiment. Actually,
Let's
people
go.
actually keep an eye on that, and it hasn't been doing very well, as you can see. Like this is fucking low. So I don't know if that's really market moving, but you know, just kind of interesting to keep an eye on, more or less. Retail sales, that'll probably be the biggest thing next week, I think. We got jobless claims again, but retail sales maybe give a little bit of idea of you know how people are spending. And yeah, it's kind of not a huge week next week.
Love to hear it.
So
I
yeah,
agree.
maybe
We
give us
need
a
a
give us a
break.
little
We need a break.
give us a little time to catch our breath, right?
All
Who knows? You can always have some surprise Fed speakers though, so gotta stay on your toes.
Yeah, I didn't know how many meetings they had. Like I didn't know that there was that, like, you know, they could have 7 meetings in one day. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. All right, boys. Well, episode 11 in the books. To the viewers, thank you all so much. You know, same time, same place next week. You know, if you found any of this useful, definitely smash the like button and the subscribe button. Throw us a comment. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the whole UST Terra Luna situation. And most importantly, stay safe out there. You know, we've on Twitter been hearing a lot of kind of horror stories. Nothing is worth more than you know, your life. And you know, at the end of the day, no matter how much money it is, it'll be all right. So from us to you, much love. Thank you all. And yeah, signing off. Wag me.
Stay safe, stay strong. Wag me.
Flag me, baby.